Hello, Sangha. This is the Abbot's address. Oh God, what is the date today? Thursday, February 8th, 2018. So we're going to continue on this business of me responding to people's queries and the agendas they hope for the Abbot's address. And we're still on the business of Buddhist history we did last time, right? And then now the next one is, please summarize all the most important texts of Buddhism. Okay, so here's another area where there's a lot. Okay, Buddhism, it's not like, like the Bible is a lot, but it's one book, but it's still too much, but it's one book. Buddhism doesn't have anything like that. There are a lot of scriptures, okay, and there's just a ton. There's a ton. So I'm going to do a radical thing here. I'm going to say, you know what? Before we start looking at some of those things, which is worth doing, I wonder how many of us have actually looked at the Western tradition. And here's what I mean by this. Okay, I feel that it's really important. I'll say it's not critical, okay, but it's really important to understand your own tradition and your own culture, at least to have more than just an immersive experience. You need to have some kind of a critical examination of it, okay? Because whether we know it or not, Aristotle and Spinoza and people like this, they actually have exerted an influence on the culture. Some good, some not so good, some a mix mostly. But it's worth being able to identify these things and understand them. Okay, now I'm going a bit on a limb here because we've got two professors of psychology that are Jakai members of the Sangha, and I have not consulted them yet. So if I'm off base, y'all let me know. Okay, but for my own personal experience, just to put it like that, I'm going to hold up a couple of references to that I think that I know have helped me. Okay, and that I think are useful. So the first one is this, okay? This is The History of Western Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. Okay, now if you've got it, for my thinking here, if you want a one-stop shop, like what is the Western philosophical tradition got going for it, here it is. Okay, and the thing about Bertrand Russell, for me, is that he in himself is a fascinating cat to check into. Very interesting. But he contextualizes the social situation that these different folks were in, and he contextualizes them in a way that it makes a lot of sense. You can see, in my view, you can see kind of the push and pull and the ebb and flow of how these things all relate, and how, for example, like Spinoza was, just to pick on one, the Inquisition is happening and there's problems, and so he decides to move to, Amsterdam, I think, and he goes, and these things make a difference, okay? So like the state where he was very liberal and very, protective, so he made a lot of statements that hold up the validity of the state. But you have to understand the context that he was in when he was saying those things, etc. Okay, now, do you need to know Spinoza from Aristotle to do the work on in the cushion in Zazen? Absolutely not. Okay, this is not even one of the top 3, 4, 5 priorities. What I'm advocating for, though, is that before we start kind of really getting into some Buddhist philosophy and things like that that are useful, that matter, it's good to have looked at the Western operating system a little bit, okay? So this one here, The History of Western Philosophy by Bertrand Russell, I love it. This helped me kind of get my head around some things back in the moment, and I like him, and I like the way he narrates these things. And obviously, this is not an easy read. This comes out to something like 800 and maybe 900 pages. So it's a bit of work, but I would recommend you can just piecemeal it. Just take a look at it. I mean, Stoicism. What's going on with Stoicism anyway? Aristotle. Really? Do you know? Do you have a sense? I mean, this is a major feature on the Western landscape for good and ill. Okay, and so here's my assertion: if you haven't looked at to some degree the Western operating system, it doesn't matter Well, it matters, but you still have not the infection of it, but you still have it. You have the Western operating system running whether you know it, whether you ascend to it or not. Now, the best way to cut through it, I'm going to say, and keep the beautiful things and let go of the stuff that's not so beautiful, is Zazen. It always comes down to practice. That's the main thing. But, or I should say, yeah, I got a lot out of understanding. I remember having a conversation with a Roman Catholic priest a while ago, and good fella, fond of him. And he starts, we get into it a little bit, and he starts going into his spiel. I'm like, oh, you like Aquinas? You're a Thomas Aquinas guy. He's like, yeah, okay. So I know where he's coming from. Then see. Is that necessary? No. Is it just a cool party trick? I mean, I don't know what kind of party that would be useful at, but maybe, but not really. But it's helpful for me, just for me, so that when I've got some orienting framework here. Okay, now especially if you've never considered the Western framework, and we start going into an actual philosophical hair-splitting difference between the Yogacara and the Nigma and all these different things. I mean, if you want to do that. You don't have to do that either. But if you do, okay, it's really useful to have a little bit of Western orientation. So here's the thick one, okay? Now, is there a great history courses that kind of runs down Western philosophy? I'm sure there is. I just haven't gone there, okay? I don't know. So I can't personally say, oh, this is a cool one I like. And again, if some of our philosophy professors and so on have like a better thing to hold up, put it in the comments, and that's totally great. I'm very open to. I suppose I'm dating myself too. This is kind of where I was when I checked it out. So Bertrand Russell, The History of Western Philosophy, and the reason I like it is it contextualizes the people and puts them in sort of a framework of history. Very important. Now, okay, that's that. Fine. Now, don't stress. Don't stress. You don't have to do this. I don't want people having conniptions, but if you've never done it, it might be interesting to graze it. Okay, here's a lighter lift. Okay, this will appeal to some, and some will think I'm crazy. Here, a cartoon introduction to philosophy. Ta-da, ta-da. Okay, much easier read. This whole thing's a graphic novel, total graphic novel, and it just goes through, and you have your character, and he goes through these adventures. And he encounters different thinkers and what have you. Okay, and so at the end of the day, this will it's a much shorter version, obviously, than Bertrand Russell, but you can clip through this pretty quickly here. Logic, perception, minds, free will. That's an interesting one. God, it's fine. Ethics, etc. Okay, so this is obviously not exhaustive. But this does give some sense. Gives some orienting thoughts about it. Okay. So again, not necessary, not critical, and not mission critical at all, but useful, particularly because we tend to. It's just the operating system of the Western mind. It's in there. See, so let's see it. Let's recognize it, and we can. Like I said, we can hold up the things that are beautiful, and we can let go of the things that aren't. Now, for my money, we get into the Western tradition. I'm all about the scientific method and science. I think that's where Western culture is amazing, right? We've made major contributions with this very simple formula of the scientific method, and we have this way of passing on a process that produces more and more amazing stuff. Fantastic. A lot of the theological hair splittings, whatever. But philosophy, very interesting to know. Okay? Last word, I had a conversation with a student at the university. Standing in line for coffee. There's a student. We strike up a conversation. What's your major? And some angst about, well, I don't really know what my major is. Oh, well, what classes are you taking? And this brilliant young person is taking philosophy. They're taking history, if I remember right. They're taking, good, well-rounded stuff, you see. And here's the thing. Be able to think critically about your culture. Be able to see, understand history. Understand the context in which all these things are coming from, right? I think our culture right now is just got everybody in such a tailspin that there's no time to actually think and reflect and and understand anything, because it's just all these hyper headlines that flash, and if it's longer than a tweet, no one can comprehend it. Okay, so you want to be countercultural? Understand your culture. Let's start with that one. Okay, check it out. I'm sure there's other ways in besides these two. Have fun with it, though. Don't make it a troublesome thing. Make it an interesting thing if you want to get in there. As always, the most important thing is to actually practice the Dharma. Show up, practice with the teachers, be in the community of Sangha, and that's the one most important thing. Then these things are kind of cool. I can say for sure that when I met Doan, she was at Episcopal Divinity School, exploring that path, which has a ton of theology and history and all that kind of stuff in it. And I was kind of flirting with the Trappist vocation. So at that time, I was immersed in Thomas Merton and pulling all the threads of where he came from and what he was pointing to, which led to Dharma, interestingly enough. Okay, enough for today. Understand your own tradition, and then next time we'll start looking at some of these Eastern things that are just so delicious. Thank you, everybody.